Henry, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
On the face of it, I don't know if you're up there at the moment, on the face of it, it looks a pretty sort of sparsely attended event, and a lot of journalists are already making the point that it's nothing like even last year's conference, and certainly nothing like any conference they've seen before when the Tories were in power. It's all looking a bit bleak, is what I'm hearing.
No, I am in Manchester. That's why I'm in this slightly bleakly lit hotel room, because the desk lamp isn't working. So I'm in the shadows. No, it is. I mean, last year's conference, obviously, there were a couple of factors, I think, which lent it a slight sort of cartoon character running on air quality. The first was that the leadership contest meant that all the media was there.
Yeah.
It was still felt very packed. But also, because Rishi called a surprise election, a lot of the big corporates had already booked their conference before he called it, right? And so last year's conference really didn't feel all that different to a conference when we were in power. Now it very much does feel like an opposition conference, and like a new to opposition conference. Everything is quieter, everything is less packed, the sort of main hall is smaller.
Yeah, and I guess that's an inevitability, because the money leaves, doesn't it, as government ceases to exist, I suppose, and the money all goes elsewhere. But I mean, in terms of the mood, I mean, one of the things that I found it fascinating yesterday was that the Tories don't yet seem to have learned from their mistakes. You know, when Kemi Badenoch comes out and starts talking a bit tougher on immigration, starts talking about leaving the ECHR, starts talking about deporting 150,000 people a year, suddenly the wets come out of the woodwork again and say, oh, we shouldn't be doing that. No, that's not what we want. You know, sort of pitting them against the voters, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem with the way that Kemi Badenoch went about the leadership contest, frankly, because the way that she did that is that she didn't offer a diagnosis, she didn't offer any policy prescription. You know, whether you like him or dislike him, Robert Jenrick ran for the leader on things like the ECHR, and if he'd won, the MPs would have had no excuse because he'd have a mandate. Whereas Kemi, what she said was, I don't know what the problems are, but I'm an engineer, I know how to find them. And that let her scoop up a lot of votes, and it won her the leadership contest. But it now means that Tory MPs, a lot of them basically used her candidacy as a snooze button, if you like, on the ideological contest that needs to happen. And so now that she is trying to make these quite big policy calls, a lot of the MPs, including mostly the MPs who supported her, they say, well, I didn't vote for Kemi Badenoch to be leader so he could leave the ECHR.
Right.
And that's the challenge that she's going to have to navigate now.
And that is the problem. And it appears, whether rightly or wrongly, it appears as well that her policy, certainly on immigration, and even their policy on saving 47 billion that Mel Stride came out with this morning on welfare and foreign aid, is very much driven by a sort of fear of reform.
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny things is that the Conservative policy review isn't meant to be over yet. According to the timetable that I had, this policy review, which was too slow. I think, you know, the Conservative Party, I've said for a while, needs policies before anyone can listen to it. But it wasn't really meant to be reporting at this point. It was meant to be next year. But what they've realised is that they need things to say, and so there are just this complete flurry of announcements. And I do worry that they're leaving some hostages to fortune. So, for example, Kemi Badenoch has said now that they've done the homework, you know, she could answer any question about the technical detail of the plan to leave the ECHR. And when she said that, I just caught sight of a couple of the people who I knew were working on the party's ECHR report. They looked slightly horrified, because that's not what they've done. They've created the party document is about why we should leave, not how we should leave.
Right.
So they are actually rushing, and I think this is somebody trying to shore up their leadership.
Yeah, well, she's sort of covering her backside from what she said before, isn't she? Because, I mean, when I interviewed her shortly before she won the leadership contest, she was talking about, you know, well, we'll wait and see. You know, I'm not ruling it out, but I don't necessarily want to say I want to leave the ECHR until I've seen, you know, how that would affect us and how much it would cost us and all of this, you know. So she's kind of, you know, reverse I don't know, judging herself, if you like, by saying, well, now we've waited long enough, now I can tell her this is why we want to do it, which is not the process. You know, the process is clearly that she's decided there's a political necessity here, and you need to say this, otherwise people are just going to walk away. In the same way that Rachel Reeves said, you know, in early part of this year, oh, now we can withdraw the withholding of the pensioners' fuel allowance because we've made the economy stable enough so that we can give it back. And everybody knew it was absolute rubbish.
I mean, that was incredible, because of course what Rachel Reeves is going to deliver in not very long now, a really extraordinarily painful budget,
Yeah.
right? And she is going to have to come back and break her promises on tax again and again and again. And I wrote at the time, it's a bit like, okay, well, she's now said that she's fixed the economy, right? At least when she came in, she was just saying the Tories
Right.
wrecked the economy. I guess I
Yeah.
have to do all these terrible things. But is it going to be the case now that it's basically just what day of the week it is, right? Like one day when she needs to give away something that she shouldn't give away, she's like, oh, well, Labour has fixed the economy. And then the very next day she'll be back in Parliament being like, well, the Tories have ruined it. Otherwise, has Mel Stride snuck into the Treasury overnight and turned the economy off? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, the other thing, and I know it's a relatively small thing, but you know, the programme for the conference itself has got a collection of Tories on the front page who are all kind of, you know, members of the shadow cabinet. But there's no Mel Stride and there's no Robert Jenrick. We had Mel Stride on this morning, and he said, "Oh well, the thing is, you know, they'd arranged to do the photo shoot. I was in America talking to the man that created the Laffer curve." But you go, well, okay, but it's not a great look, is it? I mean, are you in the inner circle or are you not? You know, you can easily rebrand the front cover. You can easily put somebody into a picture who wasn't there. You can certainly easily rearrange the photo shoot to make sure that your shadow chancellor and Robert Jenrick, who's a fairly key member of the shadow team, is actually in the picture, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I would have said so. It's not as if the photographer is busier than the shadow chancellor, right?
No.
And there are many photographers, so look,
It just
you're right.
seems a bit amateurish, you know?
It is a baffling, yeah, it is a baffling decision. I mean, at least what I will say is at least the fact that Mel Stride isn't in it does suggest that it was literally just a refusal to rearrange the photo shoot, right? Because I think if Mel was in it and it was just Robert Jenrick who hadn't made the cut in the photo shoot,
Right.
that would look a little bit like Stalin editing people out of photographs, right? So at least the non-presence of an ally suggests that that's not what it is. But it is a weird sort of excuse.
Yeah. So is there still this division in the Tory party that will show itself this weekend, or this week, I should say, between those who are sort of slightly more Europhile than others, those who are slightly softer on immigration than others? You know, is it still riven by that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The problem, if you like, for the Conservative Party is that we didn't have this fight during the leadership contest, which we need to.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful description. The problem with that wing of the party, for that wing of the party, there's a wonderful description of the Labour right in the 1970s in a history book, which is that they had principles and they had preferences, but they had no ideas.
Right.
And the same applies to the Tory left now, right? They don't want to leave the ECHR. They don't want to massively crack down on immigration. They don't want to massively crack down on public spending and all the rest of it. But they don't have any alternative program for the party. They just know what they don't want.
Yeah.
The fact is that without either leaving or getting really quite aggressive about ignoring the ECHR, the sort of immigration control that the public wants is not possible, right? And if you want to make the case for not, if you want to make the case for staying in the ECHR and for obeying all of its diktats, because of course Tony Blair didn't. Britain can just ignore the ECHR, but then you need to accept that you can't deliver immigration reform. But they won't do that, right? Because that would be political suicide. So they're sort of adrift. The politics of this country has moved so far from where it was when they started out, and they haven't caught up yet.
No, and partly the reason the country has moved is because of the way that the Tories mishandled it all when they were in charge.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is the thing, right? The tens of thousands pledge, right? Made in 2010, made again in 2015. David Cameron never even tried to hit it, right? And that was like so many things. It's one of the most frustrating things about David Cameron's premiership. He was when he was elected in 2010. He had a mandate for austerity, and the public finances were in far better state than they are now, right? Because the demographic pressures weren't as bad and all the rest of it. When he was elected, immigration was running at what, 300,000 net 300,000 a year? Do you remember those halcyon days?
Oh, yes.
When it was only 300,000 a year, right? The temperature was much, much lower. There weren't any, UKIP MPs at the time because the public still trusted the Conservatives to be this country's right-wing party. And they just consistently stuck their heads in the sand. The big problem for the Tories on immigration is that they would talk tough, and they'd appoint someone to the Home Office to talk tough. And then every single time, they'd let the Department for Education, the Department for Business, and the Treasury at the cabinet table bid up the numbers to whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
And now the public don't take the Tories seriously.
That's the problem. Henry, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Henry Hill there with his column on page 10 of The Sun today, Spotlight Time for Last Chance Kemi. And he's right. I mean, what does she do? Or what does she do if it remains as irrelevant as it currently is, the Tory party?